How's it going, everybody? This is Tava Dropper. Hope you're having another great day, and welcome back to another video. Alright, it's time for another edition of Bad Game Reviews. In this series, I'll talk about all the games that I have in my collection for the PlayStations 1, 2, 3, and 4 that I find to be insanely bad. And for today's episode, the unfortunate victim here is NASCAR Heat Evolution. Folks, good NASCAR video games are very hard to come by nowadays. In fact, the most recent console game that was released in the NASCAR series, NASCAR 21 Ignition, is widely regarded by many to perhaps be the worst console video game in the history of NASCAR. So, what was it before that game? Well, it probably may be this one, which was released all the way back in 2016. So this game was actually developed by Monster Games, and it was actually the very first video game that that company actually developed in relation to NASCAR since 2002, when they released NASCAR Dirt Daytona, which is, in my opinion, probably one of the greatest NASCAR video games ever, and it was released by Dusenberry Martin Racing. And this was the very first game since 2002 to be released under the NASCAR Heat franchise, after this organization got a license from NASCAR to be able to make these video games. It's basically like every other NASCAR video game it is. There's 36 races in a season in the NASCAR Cup Series. You get to race with some of your favorite drivers in the sport, which at the time included guys like Jimmy Johnson, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Danica Patrick, and a whole bunch of other drivers that were competing full-time in the Cup Series at that time. And there are so many other tracks that you get to race on as well, like the high banks of Daytona and Talladega, tracks like Charlotte, Atlanta, Texas, even road courses like Watkins Glen and Sonoma. You get to race at so many different places, and ultimately the objective is just like every other NASCAR game there is. If you are on the top of the point standings at the very end of the season, you will ultimately be crowned a NASCAR Cup Series champion. So this game is just like every other NASCAR game there is. But then again, a lot of NASCAR games usually varies. There are usually some good NASCAR games like NASCAR Dirt Daytona, and then there are also bad games like NASCAR 21 Ignition. This stands out as one of the bad ones in the NASCAR console gaming system, and I say that because it's probably a very bad way to bring back the Heat franchise as well, because this game was scorned when it first came out back in 2016. So yeah, NASCAR Heat Evolution is probably one of the worst NASCAR console games that was ever released, and the very first reason for that is its gameplay. Now, this will usually vary depending on every game that was released before then, especially when Electronic Arts and then Activision and then probably one other company had a license before Monster Games and Dusenberry Martin Racing had it, but this game was actually really bad. Because during the time of EA having the license, usually NASCAR games were very, very competitive. Usually, you would get to race against a whole bunch of other drivers. However, the action was a lot more competitive. Usually, you would be very close to the other drivers and you would have some exciting racing. You would feel the excitement of everything. Here in this game, it feels like for some reason you're going like 5 or 10 miles an hour faster than the rest of your competition. I say that because usually when you're putting on default mode, which is about like 50-60% or something like that, you just really run away from the pack within the first 1 or 2 laps of a race. And after that, unless there's like a caution or you have some sort of a problem, you're really not going to get caught. I don't like that. I mean, you're usually supposed to be in high-speed competitive racing against 39 other drivers on the Cup Series grid. It's supposed to be real high-octane racing. And unfortunately, it just feels like that you have some sort of an unfair advantage in this game. I mean, you have to go in and adjust the settings of it so that way you can make it a lot more competitive, but at least on default mode, it's really an unfair advantage. Not only that, you really also can't take away how hard it is sometimes to be able to control your car as well, especially in those situations where you're in the middle of a free-wide situation, or you're just trying to control your car in a turn. Sometimes it just gets real loose, and unfortunately you end up hitting the wall as a result, or end up in a very big crash. Not only that, it just really doesn't make sense. I mean, sometimes like the lap times, usually you would fall off after a few laps once the tires start wearing down. When the tires start wearing down, for some reason you just keep getting faster and faster and faster, and the lap times just become a little bit infinite as a result. And also, there are quite a few bugs in this game as well. Whenever you're trying to race around a bunch of other guys, sometimes you just go right through them, or maybe there will just be some glitch in the system that will end up keeping you from really having a shot at winning a race. I mean, development for this game was probably a little bit out of whack of sorts, and I'll get into that a little bit later on. So usually the best NASCAR video games, usually the developers will find a way to be able to make it so easy to play and also enjoyable, so that way people that play a NASCAR video game, like for example NASCAR Thunder 2004 or NASCAR Dirt Daytona, they would have a lot of fun doing so. Here, not only sometimes you have an unfair advantage, but even when you do adjust the settings, sometimes it's just very hard to be able to drive your car, and as a result, it just becomes a little bit more difficult to play once you end up adjusting the settings and all that stuff. It's a little unfair in both ways. Next thing I have to talk about is the audio. Now, first thing I want to talk about is the soundtrack. I feel like that it was a little bit bland, obviously. I just feel like that, the songs that they have in the background, usually during the main menu, I just don't feel like that it usually stands compared to all the previous NASCAR games that I had for electronic arts, from NASCAR 2002 to NASCAR 08 before they lost their license. So I really didn't like that. The next thing is in the actual racing in itself. Usually when you're in a NASCAR video game, whenever you're driving around, you really feel that high octane speed. Not here. For some reason, it just feels like that you're really racing on lawnmowers, because really, whenever you're driving around other cars or you're side by side in a competition, I don't know, it's just like that real screeching sound that makes you feel like that you're racing a lawnmower, or really it's just like a disc scratch whenever you crash instead of actual high octane speed. I mean, for some reason, the audio just seems really, really off. Not only that, there's not really a whole lot of excitement in regards to, the crew chiefs talking to you and the sponsors and stuff like that. Usually in past NASCAR games, whenever you have like somebody that's really speaking to you, it really gives you a lot of good information. And not only that, it gives you a little bit more confidence to be able to race. It just feels a little bit more dull for some reason. I mean, whenever your crew chief or your sponsor is talking to you, it just doesn't feel like that you're really in the middle of the game. And then not only that, the pit sounds whenever you're going to pit road and make a pit stop, for some reason there's a lot of real like screeching sounds that are coming out and stuff like that. I don't know why, but it just feels like the audio is just off in this game. Not only that, sometimes it's also a little bit out of place too. Like whenever you're like spinning around and stuff like that, sometimes it will be like a second or two wait before you ultimately start hearing the screeching sounds of your tires whenever you're spinning around and stuff like that. And even whenever you're celebrating as well, for some reason it just feels just off. I mean, it just doesn't feel like that you're really there at an actual NASCAR race whenever you're playing a NASCAR video game. For just some reason, it just doesn't feel right whatsoever. Yeah, I really enjoyed the high octane speed, but unfortunately, this felt more like that I was really in my backyard going on a lawnmower and just hearing a lot of like crappy sounds and all that stuff, because with the audio the way it is, it just didn't feel like that I was at an actual NASCAR race. I also really didn't like the lack of features in regards to like other stuff in this game. Usually in past NASCAR games, like one of the things that I really enjoyed about EA Sports games, especially later, is that you had every single one of the national series in their games, particularly with the NASCAR Nationwide Series at the time, now NASCAR Xfinity Series, and in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. You get to compete in those series as well. You get to race some of the drivers there, and also compete in various different tracks in that series as well. For some reason, you don't get that here. It's only the NASCAR Cup Series, unfortunately, that you're racing at, especially since it's really just 40 drivers from a Cup Series instead of just, having other national series in there, especially a touring series. I don't really like that. I just feel like that for some reason, it really just doesn't give you the excitement. Like, you're only just competing in one NASCAR series, and just really the lack of and all that matter. It just doesn't feel right to have, just one series instead of a whole bunch of other NASCAR championships in there as well. And there are also a whole bunch of features in games like, Total Team Control of NASCAR 07, where you really just get to play a little bit of antics as well. You get to swap around with other drivers. You also get to make some audible calls as well. You don't really get that here. I definitely would have liked to have seen something like that there in NASCAR Heat Evolution, but unfortunately you really don't get that there. You can just only rely on your crew chief and stuff like that. And sometimes, the way that the car handles and stuff like that, there isn't really many features for you to be able to really adjust the settings well, so that way you can be able to really get an even footing with the rest of the competition in the game as well. So unfortunately, there's always an unfair advantage somewhere, or maybe a disadvantage as well. And finally, you get some real cool features, like, like in the career modes, for example, like in NASCAR Daytona and then a whole bunch of other NASCAR video games, you'll get some really cool features in the career mode, especially, like lightning challenges as well, and really ways to be able to adjust your own cars as well, or even make your own cars, create your own teams or something like that. Those are almost non-existent in this game. You're just picking one of your drivers that are already featured in this list and you're just going racing. And while it may sound fun, I do wish that there were times where you can be able to really make your own team. Unfortunately, it's just hard to be able to do that in this game while making it enjoyable at the same time as well. It's just get in a car with somebody that's already famous and just race. So yeah, some of those extra features, those are usually what helps make a NASCAR game very enjoyable, especially in the multiplayer aspect, the online multiplayer aspect, where it makes those games a lot more enjoyable. Those lack of features are really going to be what hampers video games like this down, because unfortunately it doesn't give you that many options to be able to really get the best possible experience in playing a racing video game like this, and unfortunately it did not help NASCAR Heat Evolution's case. Then there are graphics. Now, in games like NASCAR Thunder 2004, NASCAR Dirt Daytona, and all those games, the graphics, they were aligned very, very well with the settings at the time those games were releases, because it really gets you right into the action. It allows you to really feel like that you are there at the actual race, and really just enjoy the sights and sounds of the fans really waving at you, while enjoying all the action that there is in the game. Not here in NASCAR Heat Evolution. This is a game that was released for the PlayStation 4, and for some reason, when I look at the graphics in this game, it feels like that this was released for the PlayStation 2 instead of the PlayStation 4. I mean, I don't really know why. The graphics in this game makes us feel like that this should have been released for the PlayStation 2, and it just feels wrong as a result. Not only that, whenever you do crash, unless it's a really big accident or something like that, it's not like NASCAR Thunder 2004 where you see that damage right away. I mean, the damage is almost barely even noticeable unless you're like going upside down or something like that, where you're involved in a really big accident. I mean, like I said before, you're probably going to have to adjust the settings or something like that, just so that way you can really experience the full damage that you end up suffering if you're involved in a big accident like that. Not only that, some of the AI in this game as well, the way they work, especially, like the fire suits and the facial expressions or something like that, it don't really look like some of the guys that you would really see at the actual track in itself whenever you're watching on TV, like the Carl Edwards and, the Jimmy Johnsons and Dale Jr.'s and stuff like that. For some reason, they look like really weird or stuff like that. Like they just don't look normal whatsoever. I don't like that, The AI for every NASCAR video game, whenever you're looking at drivers, they have to look just like the drivers in real life. And for some of them, the facial expressions in this one, I don't know, they just don't work very well alike. Yeah, I don't know who was in charge of the graphics for this game, but they were just really messed up. I mean, this was a game that looks like that really it was hastily made together for a PlayStation 2 copy instead of a PlayStation 4 game. Remember, this was released in 2016. This was just about a couple years after the PlayStation 4 was released, so usually around this time, the graphics will really have to be as best. They did improve in future games in the NASCAR Heat franchise, but man, not in this one. This was a bad start. Finally, it just doesn't feel very exciting. In fact, it feels really boring as well. Back in the 2000s, when NASCAR console games were really at its peak, it really had a whole bunch of features and a whole lot of different levels and modes that really helped make NASCAR video games very exciting and popular to get at the time. Here, it just doesn't feel very exciting to play. I mean, good NASCAR video games are really hard to come by nowadays. In fact, NASCAR Thunder 2004, which was released back in 2003, and again, in my opinion, is the greatest NASCAR console game of all time. It really maximized all the potential of a potential NASCAR video game. It had all the challenges, it really had all the cool features, to get to create your own cars, and really just, make all the settings that you could possibly can to really enjoy the possible experience of a NASCAR video game. Here, after at least 1 or 2 days of playing it, you just really lose the excitement of it after a short period of time. I don't know why, especially that there's only one real national series that you get to race in the NASCAR Cup Series, instead of just having all those national and touring series in a video game as well. It just doesn't feel very exciting, You just get those lack of features in this game that really doesn't allow you to enjoy the game, and as a result, with all the bugs and the glitches that are in this game as well, it just doesn't feel like a really fun NASCAR game that's really worth playing for a little while. I mean, look, after that, NASCAR Heats 2 through 5, obviously, it experienced a good amount of improvement with all those games, and then, of course, it really went downhill with NASCAR 21 Ignition, and, of course, that could lead to the loss of the license for motorsports games, which was developing NASCAR 21 Ignition, and potentially a new company that's getting that license back. I mean, I don't know who it is. I mean, I heard there are potentials of Electronic Arts and Codemasters potentially getting back. That would be really exciting. Maybe somebody else, or maybe even iRacing. I know they've had a lot of success recently in regards to, like video game style racing in regards to a lot of motorsports, especially in NASCAR. So that would be pretty cool if iRacing got an NASCAR license entirely. But still, in order to feel like that you're really there at the actual race while you're playing the game, you really have to find a way to be able to make sure that this game is developed to the fullest of potential, to make sure sure that, the fans of NASCAR, the longtime die-hard fans of NASCAR that are playing this game really enjoy the experience that they get when they're playing this game. Unfortunately, with the way this game turned out, you just do not get that here. And as a result, it's probably one of the worst NASCAR video games that was ever released. Now again, good NASCAR video games are rare to find nowadays, and even after then, especially with NASCAR's Heat 2 all the way through 5, even though there were improvements, it just didn't really capture that excitement that, all the old NASCAR video games from the 2000s were. And unfortunately, NASCAR 21 Ignition is exactly the reason why the future of NASCAR console gaming is in the flux as it is. But you know what? At the very least, NASCAR Heat Evolution no longer really has that title as the worst of all time in regards to NASCAR console games, because NASCAR 21 Ignition, I don't have that game in my collection, and maybe I'll get that soon, but man, I'm glad not to have it right now in my collection, especially with seeing some of the gameplay and all the glitches that I saw in that one, because that one looks like absolute crap. NASCAR console games are also going to continue to be developed, and hopefully we finally see the real success of NASCAR console gaming again in the near future, whoever gets the NASCAR license eventually, like we did in the early 2000s. But man, we're bringing back the Heat franchise. Unfortunately, NASCAR Heat Evolution did not get it off to a good start, and as a result, this game ended up feeling like that it came in last place, and as a result, it is another bad game in my video game collection. So that's going to do it for my bad game review of NASCAR Heat Evolution. Now, again, there are so many other games that I have in my collection, both good and bad as well, so I would really like to hear from you. What other games would you like for me to review? Feel free to let me know down in the comments below. I'll take a look at them, play it for a little bit, and then I'll give you my review on what I think about those games as soon as I possibly can. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. As always, if you'd like to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when my latest video is released. Comment below for future suggestions of all my videos, whether it's blogs, projects, or challenges, you name it. Leave it in the comments below and I'll do my best to make them. And as always, follow me, my social media, all the links are in the description below. That's going to do it for this video. I hope you're having another great day. And as always, I hope to see you on me again in another video very soon. And if you're a die-hard NASCAR video gamer, I really give it some thought before getting this game. Well, at the very least, it's not as bad as NASCAR 21 Ignition. Yeah. So long, everybody.